this transition team is kind of working. It's both presbyteries are involved, and we're kind of
Sure.
just gathering information and working together. And they decided that the best way, rather than try to write it up and, everybody picks out things and forgets things, that we would just listen to each other's interviews.
There you go. Okay.
And your current role in the presbytery is you're like the general presbyter, right? Is that right?
I'm the presbytery leader. That's
Okay.
my title.
All right.
Yeah. There's nothing general about me.
And that was also your role during the merger, right?
Yes.
When
Yes.
you guys were
I've been presbytery leader in this corner of New Jersey for 11 years.
okay.
Almost 11 years. Yeah.
So what one or two things did you guys do that you thought were particularly helpful in this whole process?
Well, first of all, we were the ones who started it, along with Monmouth Presbytery, and started the conversation going with the synod about doing this. We just knew that several of our presbyteries in New Jersey didn't have the resources to do the work they needed, and that was going to change. So we needed to realign the boundaries, more than just merging. Mostly just because of, New Jersey has its own unique, way of doing things. And we had 7 presbyteries, and it had those 7 presbyteries. Let's see, Newton was 200 years old and New Brunswick was 300 years old. So all those presbyteries were been around for a long time. So it needed to be really rethought, in terms of highways and culture and stuff like that. So that was more than just merging. So it was a bigger conversation. But one of the things that we did right from the beginning was talk about it. This is going to happen somehow. This is, what is this going to look like? And not surprise the presbytery with it. And unfortunately, New Brunswick presbytery got surprised because the leadership wasn't talking about it. So when it happened, they were like, what is this? Kind of thing. So I think that was really important to start setting the cultural conversation first. What would that mean? How would things change? Probably part of what was good for us, I think, in that conversation is Old Newton Presbytery didn't get cut up. It's the same presbytery. It was because we're stuck up in the corner. There was no place for anybody to go. What I mean? It's kind of like they ended up building the new presbytery around the boundaries of Newton. And the same with South Jersey, West Jersey. They had no place to go. So they pretty much stayed together. The ones in the middle, had the bigger shift of culture and, that kind of thing. So ours wasn't that big of a shift, and the culture we had already created in the presbytery then just was able to expand. We already had a very healthy presbytery. We had a good structure. So one of the problems we have right now is people like our structure. And so when I'm trying to talk about, well, do we want to do things differently? Here's an opportunity to be creative. They're like, no, things are good. It's like, okay, so in a sense, that culture was able to continue, but some of it was a lot of communication, every step we took, it was reported to the presbyteries, reported to the leadership. We had conversations about it. It was no surprise, kind of.
Did you have those conversations in did you set up anything like a chat room to answer questions, on
Not right away. Once we knew it was imminent, we did.
Okay.
But before that, it was newsletter articles, just reporting to Presbytery, reporting to COM, reporting to ACT, which is our coordinating team, our administration team. Just,
Did
whenever
people
there's a
use?
Presbytery leader opportunity, and we
Yeah.
had the Synod brought together a group to do the missional conversation to begin with. And we had two pastors ended up being two pastors from our Presbytery who were part of that. And they gave reports at Presbytery meetings, wrote up things in the newsletter. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out. We're pretty active on our Facebook and our Facebook forums that we have. So we did that kind of stuff first before we got to this is what it's going to actually look like. When we got to that, then we did have pastor gatherings, which we were kind of forced to do them online because it was just before the pandemic. It was we did the transition in 2021, early 2021. So in 2020, we had already, just about the time the pandemic started, we had already decided what it was going to look like. So, so it was helpful that way because before that, we weren't doing too much online, meetings, but now we now do, that's like normal now.
Right.
So we did that. I think that was one of the important pieces kind of thing.
What do you think the biggest challenge was, or a challenge that surprised you during the process?
One of the challenges was we were promised some help from the Synod, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
The Synod did not follow through. And when they did follow through, it was pretty inadequate. So there was a lot of having to go around them to get some things done, mostly administrative kind of stuff. Things like tax numbers, corporation issues. We were pretty much told they would take care of all our corporation paperwork. Well, they didn't. So we ended up having to get our own attorney to do it. Which was okay. It's just that you were expecting one thing and you have to do another, so some of it was not following through on the structure that they had promised, or made or communicated that this was going to happen. That was a hard one. Within the Presbytery, I think some of it was, again, it was the pandemic, so it's probably not the same, was creating a community, because we couldn't get together. I mean, the Presbytery was a presbytery a whole year before we actually had our first in-person meeting. So that was a challenge, was building that community, and that was important right from the start. I think we're coming on 2.5 years, going 3 years in March. It took us a really good year to even figure out how to do the community piece. So right from the start, we knew that was important. And I think there are still some who don't feel part of the community yet, that some of it's not for lack of our trying. They just choose not to, they choose not to.
What were your most successful things that you did that built community? Because that's obviously a big issue for us too.
Yeah.
So what were your,
online pastor gatherings.
Okay. And once you got COVID, then what did you do?
Oh, after COVID? Well, before, I think even now, because everybody meets online anyway, those would be helpful. Pastor retreats.
Okay.
I think getting pastors on board first, because they're going to be the ones who translate it to their churches. So they need to feel like there's community, and then they're gonna, then we went for the clerks. Some of it is we had transition change of our state clerk. When we got our new state clerk last year, his job was to get the clerks together. And so that was through training events and newsletter and, just gatherings. We're fortunate Johnsonburg camp is within our bounds. So we can use that all the time, so it's, so we had a gathering place for retreats and stuff, but the clergy retreats were big. And the other thing, which we still do, is small groups at presbytery meetings. They love small groups at presbytery meetings, whether we're in person or all Zoom. We do small groups, and I only get positive feedback. And we usually have some sort of, sort of appreciative inquiry kind of question, and tell us a story, that kind of thing. And they're like, they look forward to it. If we don't have it, one time we just ran out of time. We had a whole bunch of stuff going on. They were like, are we ever going to do small groups again? I was like, it was just one time. Come on, people. Yeah. So they do like that, but getting together in person.
Your pastor retreats, were they day-long retreats, or were they
overnight retreats? Yeah.
Okay.
At Johnsonburg. So yeah, we had retreats there. We even last 2 times we had retreats. We did them Monday through Tuesday, and then Tuesday evening or afternoon into the evening was the presbytery meeting. So they were, kind of rolling right into one into the other. Just because it worked out schedule wise to do it that way. No reason other than that. The other really significant challenge I know for all of the presbyteries was the administration stuff, because we were going from 7 to 4. It was getting documentation of churches to the same place. It was figuring out financial assets. That's one thing the synod did do, and did, they were slow, but they were thorough. But they did do that, was, figuring out how do we divide, because we weren't just merging, we were dividing. Our Highlands Presbytery got parts of basically all of 4 presbyteries. So how do you divvy up the financial assets and that kind of thing? I don't think it went as fairly as we had hoped it would, because some presbyteries, like Newark Presbytery, just had a whole lot of money, and Palisades Presbytery had a whole lot of money, but New Brunswick and Monmouth didn't. So even though it was divided up by membership, those presbyteries didn't necessarily get as much. Newark and Palisades, that now Northeast just has probably more money than all the presbyteries combined. So it wasn't kind of where we were kind of like, can we figure out a way to help out the new presbyteries be financially stable? And that did not get translated. So that was one. But the other one was because, well, maybe there's other reasons, but I would like to think it's because of this, because the like Elizabeth, New Brunswick, and Monmouth, and Palisades, they didn't have strong presbytery leadership for quite a few years. And their record keeping was horrible, absolutely horrible. So, the big question I always had was, okay, how do we get your records? How do we get, and they didn't have records, or it was literally a room, a storage room off someplace with file cabinets, and things were just shoved in file cabinets. We still haven't got the electronic files we were promised. So it does make a difference and being able to get started administratively well with churches. You have to some of it you just have to accept. When they say this is what it is, you're just like, I don't know if that's true, but I guess I have to go with it. So making sure everybody does their paperwork before you merge. And so when you do merge, that paperwork, it doesn't seem like a big deal if you're from, the outside, if you're a pastor or a church, but it's a huge deal when your committee on ministry needs to know how they can help you and they don't have no records on it. So those and pastors, we've got to have those records up to date. And we're still sorting out, literally Sonia, our office manager, had to drive to where 2 of the presbyteries had stored their files and take boxes and just pick through the files until she found all the churches she needed, and pastors. And she's still got, I forget how many boxes she came back with, but I think she still has like 2 boxes that she still has to finish.
Do you have a list of that paperwork that you would send? Do you have a letter that said these are the records we need from you?
That's a good question.
Share.
Let me ask Sonia. She'd be the one who put that together. Yeah, financial records we need of churches, we need per capita, because churches will say, well, we paid our per capita. We have no record of it, because no one gave us that. We did track down some. Again, we were after, we had Newton, but we had 3 presbyteries we had to find. So
I think we've got most of that, but it wouldn't hurt if you've got a letter, dear church, this is what we need from you. That would.
No, it's not the church. It's the presbytery. Okay. Dear presbytery, we need to have these records. Yeah.
I still think that might be helpful as we're thinking out how to join those things. We're a little bit ahead of the game because we are already sharing staff.
Yeah, that does help. Yeah,
and that does help.
and that's different from us,
right?
Well, one is the deal was in the beginning because Debbie in South Jersey, West Jersey, and me in Newton Highlands, we were the only installed permanent presbytery leaders. Everybody else was transitional or didn't have one, and so right from the start, they were like, well, if we do this, then everybody's job is up on the line. And I said, if you make that a criteria, then my presbytery's out. They will not do it. Because I'd only been there at that point like 5 years. I mean, this has been going on a long time. At that point, I'd been there 4 or 5 years, and they were like, no, Jeanne gets to stay. And same with West Jersey said, we're not going to search for another pastor, another presbytery leader. So you have to. So that was part of the deal. So there was some stability, in that, and some history to, go with as we transition into the new and working together. That was helpful. So it's, like you said, you're sharing staff, so that's probably a good thing. We didn't necessarily share staff, but we did have some stability and leadership, kind of thing.
So what does your committee structure look like? Is it really traditional, or did you do some new things?
No, pretty traditional. CP pretty down. Well, Newton was already pretty lean. We did, if you wanted to do something special, you just put together a task group and did it. So we just had the basics, mandatory committees and a couple like church development. And then we put together, we had a young leader formation team. That pretty much was the same. What we had in Newton was pretty much what we brought into Highlands, with a few responsibility changes, different things in there, but not a whole lot. Some, but not a lot. Actually gave the committees probably more commission work. They gave more responsibility than we had before. And we found the structure we have now is working just fine.
Okay.
Kind of thing.
So one of the issues that we face is a lot of work to be done with small churches that need to close, and churches in conflict, and churches that need to be nurtured. And, there's a lot of just presbytery work. And then on top of all of that, you have this crushing, what feels at this point like a crushing load of merger issues to come together.
I think that's true. I think we really felt, and we did it in the middle of the pandemic.
Mhm.
So don't recommend that. Do not do
Okay,
it.
I'll tell her.
Do not do it, in a time of crisis. But it really did suck up a lot of the time. Yeah. I'm not saying it didn't, and probably churches felt neglected. But
Did
one
you
of the
make
things
that part of the process at all by telling churches, we got to put some things on hold? You're not
no, we
gotten
just neglected them. Well, in Newton, they weren't neglected because we had a strong structure, but it was the other presbyteries that their churches just got neglected. And that was one of the first things we had to do, was figure out who needs help, and we're still working on that.
Right.
One of the things we did do is we added a stated clerk and resourcing staff person and it was I thought it was going to be like a 30-hour thing, because we had a very part-time clerk and a very part-time resourcing, person in Newton. And when I said, well, the clerk had left and it was we were in transition, it was end of 2021. They said, no, we're going to go full-time, whether we can afford it or not. And that has been a huge help, to have that extra full-time person.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have people who have to split their time between a church and being stated clerk or whatever, you don't have their full attention.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed someone who gave me the full attention, and that has been great in being able to have someone to talk to say, okay, go, you check on that church, I'll check on that church. And what we did last year when Steve started, we agreed that he and I would not fill pulpits. Mm-hmm. So if the church was, pastor was on vacation, they had to find someone else. What we did do is go to some of these neglected churches and pastors, because pastors were still having trouble with the post-pandemic stuff and burnout and stuff like that. We would call up pastors, especially from the former New Brunswick Presbytery, because they were pretty neglected. And we would call them up and say, I'm going to come preach for you, but you have to be there. Mm. I'm going to give you a week off, basically, and just come and talk about the presbytery. But it got us into the pulpits, into the churches, and it gave the pastor a connection to the presbytery in a positive way. Mm-hmm. So we didn't use our time to just fill pulpits. Once or twice I did, because it was an emergency or something. But most of the time, Steve and I, for like 6 months, that's all we did, was twice a month. Each of us would do 2 Sundays a month. Mm-hmm. And so four churches a month got the presbytery showing up. Yeah. I think that was a lot to build community, but also to give them a face, or at least an opening. If they need something, they can tell us. Mm-hmm. Or call us, and that really made a difference. Mm-hmm. It really helped pastors. And I had one pastor, after I did it, he was just like, you don't know how, and he was only a half-time pastor, and he says, you don't know how much that helped me, to the point where I realized I can't do this and I'm out. I was like, well, that wasn't the intention. But the pandemic had been hard, and it was a tough church. Yeah. And it was a church that the presbytery had just written off. And I was like, well, I'm not writing them off. First of all, they're in right downtown Lambertville, and I can't write them off because if that church closes, there's nothing we can do. It's one of those, what do we do with the property kind of stuff. And it's in a great location to do some great ministry. So we, that was helpful, also to help me get an evaluation of where the churches are and what they need to do. And do we need to raise them to the top, of attention? Some yes, and some were like, oh, we're fine. You don't need to bother us, kind of thing. So yeah, so there was a lot of having to do that with the small churches, but yeah, that first year, 2021, really was about getting the structure together and getting documentation in place. I think other presbyteries just didn't realize it. I kept saying to them, do your structure first, then do your visioning. Oh no, we got to do visioning first. No, structure first, visioning. That's what everybody who's called me and asked me about how to do the merger, structure first, visioning second. Don't try to come up with a vision or even try to, build the community. Get your structure in place, because if that fails, people will notice and it will cause anxiety. But you got to have the structure that, is not going to cause anxiety, kind of thing. So people need to know, who do I call? Does COM have all the policies they need? Where do I find the information? Our webpage is just loaded with our documents. People will say, what about this? It's on our webpage. I'm surprised how many presbyteries don't put their documents on their webpage. I just don't know why. But so structure first. That would be my advice to everybody who's asked me. Okay. Get your structure in place, get your documents in place. Because so many of our documents that you have to have are just standard, but you got to have them.
Right. Right.
And just put those in place. Bylaws, get your corporation stuff done. Especially corporation stuff needs to be done before you file any taxes. People don't realize that. Those, if anything, that's the first thing you have to do when you get that all in place.
Do you think there would have been an advantage, or would you to hiring a project manager kind of person?
Well, that was the plan that the Synod was supposed to do, and they didn't.
Okay.
So the Synod was supposed to have a person who was, kind of reminding you, did you get this done? Helping you find, kind of working with, because you had 4 presbyteries you had to work with, and that didn't happen. So yeah, I think
did the Synod have paperwork for y'all about, that list of stuff? Okay.
No.
Well, I know we don't do a whole lot of those.
No, I shouldn't, kind of badmouth our Synod. They could have fixed it. They could have fixed it. They didn't. They chose not to. But at the same time, just as the transitioning was happening, our Synod exec got sick and left, had to go on medical leave. You didn't have another Synod person left and retired, so there's a huge Synod changeover.
Yeah.
And the new Synod staff just wasn't on board, with what was going on. So that was some of it.
Sure.
But there was a point where the presbytery leadership said, this is what needs to happen. You need to fix this. And they didn't. So some of it's their fault. Some of it is not their fault. But I think synods could play a very, very helpful role in it, in providing that project manager or that transition, I don't want to say transition leader, that's the wrong word, but that someone who just sort of, walks alongside and says, here, this. Instead, our Synod put together an administrative commission, and that wasn't helpful because they had very limited responsibilities, and there was no room for making changes, adapting what they did, their role. So I think if you had, like you said, a project manager or a Synod staff person just assigned to this, Yeah, that would be great. I would not go the administrative commission route,
Okay.
you know.
Anything else that you
I don't
wanted
know.
to
What else
tell?
you got? Um, I don't know. What else?
I think we covered all the questions per se.
Yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to ask? I mean, uh, ours is an example. I know a lot of presbyteries throughout the now, throughout the denomination were watching how New Jersey went because this was a
Mhm.
big one. This isn't
Right.
just bringing, your Lackawanna and Lehigh, right?
Mhm.
Is Northumberland coming in on this or no? All right, so you just got two, and it's more of a merger than an actual realignment of
Mhm. Yeah.
boundaries and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So ours was like big. Even the office of the General Assembly said no one's ever done it like this before, so it was new to them too.
Mhm.
So I think, some things went well, some things did not go well at all, and I think some of it is people overthought, how to make it. It was like just keep it simple, but at the same time, they were all, you know, dealing with anxiety because Monmouth and New Brunswick presbyteries were just full of anxiety. Um, but I think, of course, we had the pandemic right in the middle of it, and
Right. And
that
that doesn't
that,
help.
that didn't help.
Right.
So, so there are good things and things that didn't go well.
Mhm.
Um, but again, I think looking back, structure first, leadership next, kind of thing. And then do your visioning, your mission, um, that kind of stuff. But get those other things. I always say get the foundation stuff foundational and
Right.
work from there.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your
Sure,
time
sure,
very much. And on behalf of the committee, thank you.
sure.
Because there's always a committee.
Yep.
And we appreciate it.
Okay. Well, if they have any more questions, give me a call.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye.